Welcome back to the Think, See, Listen channel, where I give it to you raw and uncut and uncensored, unedited and completely unprofessional, all to give glory to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Part 9! Alex Jones' book, Great Reset and War for the World. War for the World by Alex Jones. Part 9, jumping right into it. Henry Kissinger warned us when he said, "Control the food, control the people, control the energy, control the continents, control the money, control the world." We've already discussed their goal to control energy, people, and countries. Later, we will talk about their strategy in controlling the money. Now, let's talk about what Henry Kissinger said first: control the food. Now, I have to warn you, this is a bit scary, but of course you can handle it because you want a better world. What's going on? What are the real motivations behind this? Who are the players involved? And of course, most importantly, what are the implications for this for our own health and for the future of the country and for the world? They're telling us that realizing the Great Reset is a precursor to sustainable development. They say it's all about the environment. As we've discussed in the energy and climate chapter, they've been saying for 50 years that if we don't act fast, the world will end. Many of these elites have gone so far as to say the world will end in a cataclysmic event if we don't do exactly what they say. As we discussed already, the World Economic Forum has been saying that lockdowns are quietly improving cities around the world. Yes, millions of people are losing their jobs, supply chains are breaking down, millions are being pushed into poverty, suicides, drug overdoses. As they say, it's actually improving the planet, right? So the first thing, if you haven't already caught on by now, is that they want us off meat. They don't want us eating meat. Why? Why don't they want us eating meat? Is it bad for our health? Let's dig into that a little bit. As mentioned, Henry Kissinger says that if you can control the food, you can control the people. The globalists say we need to go on a planetary health diet to save the world, as stated in a World Economic Forum article from 2019 with the title, "Why We Need to Go on the Planetary Health Diet to Save the World." Here's an excerpt from that article. As the below chart shows, the main change to many Western diets is going to be in the consumption of red meat. Cutting back to only 14 grams a day and just 30 calories, which equates to about a mouthful of typical sirloin steak. Starchy vegetables including potatoes and cassava, a staple in African countries, are limited to just 50 grams a day, while fish, which is such a big part of Japanese and other Asian diets, is limited to 28 grams. Are we in the West only going to get a single mouthful of red meat a day? It seems that Japan and other countries aren't going to fare much better with 2 mouthfuls of fish. And if you're American, it looks like you'll only get about 3.5 mouthfuls of potato or cassava. In their own words, what's the plan? They tell us, the report says this includes more than doubling the consumption of healthy foods such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts, and a greater than 50% reduction in global consumption of less healthy foods such as added sugars and red meat. The planetary health diet, which involves a shift towards plant-based eating, was designed by 37 experts as part of the EAT Lancet Commission to answer the question of how we're going to feed a projected 10 billion people without destroying the planet by 2050. What do the globalists have against meat? It might be that eating and cooking meat is what made us the brilliant, quarreling humans we are today, as detailed in a 2016 story from Time magazine quoting a study from Nature. As a new study in Nature makes clear, not only did processing and eating meat come naturally to humans, it's entirely possible that without an early diet that included generous amounts of animal protein, we wouldn't have even become human, at least not the modern, verbal, intelligent humans that we are. According to Harvard University biologist Catherine Zink and Daniel Lieberman, the authors of the Nature paper, Proto-humans eating enough root food to stay alive would have had to go through up to 15 million chewing cycles a year. This is where meat stepped and ran and scurried in to save the day. Prey that has been killed and then prepared either by slicing, pounding, or flaking provides a much more calorie-rich meal than with much less chewing than root foods do, boosting nutrient levels overall. If it was meat that fueled our explosive growth and intelligence and ability to problem solve, is it reasonable to ask what would happen to a modern brain deprived of meat? Would we become less intelligent? Some research reported in the BBC for 2020 supports this possibility. Ideally, to test the impact of the vegan diet on the brain, you would take a randomly selected group of people, ask half to stop eating animal products, then see what happens. But there isn't a single study like this. Instead, the only research that comes close involved the reverse. It was conducted on 555 Kenyan school children who were fed one of the 3 different types of soup, one with meat, one with milk, and one with oil, or no soup at all, as a snack over 7 school terms. They were tested before and after to see how their intelligence compared. Because of their economic circumstances, the majority of the children were de facto vegetarians at the start of the study. It's not a perfect study, but a pretty good one. The children were de facto vegetarians. Then they were given meat and followed over 7 school terms. The results should have us questioning any move toward an exclusively plant-based diet. Surprisingly, the children who were given the soup containing meat each day seemed to have a significant edge. By the end of the study, they outperformed all the other children on a test for nonverbal reasoning. Along with the children who received soup with added oil, they also did best on a test of arithmetic ability. Of course, more research is needed to verify if this effect is real and if it would also apply to adults in affected countries, but it does raise some intriguing questions about whether veganism could be holding some people back. Admittedly, much of this is hypothetical, and while there doesn't seem to be a lot of good data, that doesn't seem to be stopping the globalists' war on meat. Why might that be? Meat is likely associated with higher intellectual function. If you're lying to people, it's probably easier if they're not as smart as they might otherwise be. Some evidence suggests veganism is likely associated with lower intellectual function. I believe a planet of vegans would be much easier to control than a planet of meat eaters. Bill Gates has become the largest owner of farmland in the United States and owns over 242,000 acres of farmland. He seems to be following in lockstep with Kissinger. According to the latest numbers from 2021, there are approximately 895 million acres of farmland in the United States. Although he is the largest owner of farmland, he still seems to own a relatively small share, less than 1%. If the World Economic Forum says that you will own nothing and be happy. Why is Bill Gates so busy buying all the farmland? Could it be that you will own nothing, but they will own everything? An article in Forbes in 2019 explained why money managers were moving into farmland and noted in the introductory paragraph that the acquisitions of Bill Gates. Farmland has proven to be an attractive asset class for professional investors, with almost uniformly positive returns since the early 1990s. This is because investors can make money from two ways: from the annual cash rent that farmers pay to use the land, and also from steady increases in farm values. For example, consider a standard piece of farmland in the Midwest or the South, assuming an annual cash rent of 4% and land value growth of 6%. The total return would be around 10%. For stable and productive row crop farms, this would be considered normal or even attractive long-term returns in the current environment. On the other end of the spectrum, an almond farm in California may produce an 8% yield and annual land value growth of 4%, resulting in annualized returns of 12%. It seems like in the real future, the globalists have planned. You'll own nothing. Bill Gates will be your landlord, and he'll be very happy collecting all that rent. I want you to see all of this as part of a plan. Bill Gates and big money have stepped into controlling and consolidating the farmland and food supply. The number of independent farms has gone down drastically from 2,166,780 farms in 2000 to 2,012,050 in 2020. A loss of more than 150,000 farms. You may notice that this is the same strategy they've used in their war against businesses during lockdowns. You couldn't shop at the mom and pop retailers, but you could go to Target, Walmart, and Costco, or order online from Amazon and put money in the pocket of Jeff Bezos. Whether you believe it was part of a plan or just how things happened during the lockdowns, many small retailers went out of business, leading to record profits among the large retailers, just the sort of people who attend the yearly meetings of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. By thinning the ranks of the competitors, the globalists can much more easily pick off the few remaining survivors. Alarmingly, the food business is controlled by just a handful of large corporations, according to an article from the Greenpeace website. 6 corporations, Monsanto, DuPont, Dow, Syngenta, Bayer, and BASF, control 75% of the world pesticides market. Factory farms now account for 72% of poultry production, 43% of egg production, and 55% of pork production worldwide. Only 4 corporations, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus, control more than 75% of the global grain trade. They overwhelmingly push commodity crops like corn and soy on local farmers at the expense of native farmers. Consolidation makes it easier to control an industry, just as the Rockefeller family did in the 19th century with oil and gas. You see, these billionaires claim to be philanthropists, but it's the same old playbook. Figure out how to create a monopoly. And if we get rid of the farmers who raise meat products, what will we eat? Bill Gates has a couple ideas. You might want his lab-grown synthetic meat. How appetizing. Here's Bill Gates talking about it in February of 2021. 2021. I do think all the rich countries should move to 100% synthetic beef. You can get used to the taste difference, and the claim is they're going to make it taste even better over time. Eventually, the green premium is modest enough that you can sort of change the behavior of people or use regulation to totally shift the demand. So for meat in the middle income and above countries, I do think it's possible. But it's one of those ones where, wow, you have to track it every year and see. And the politics are challenging. There are all these bills that say it's basically got to be called basically lab garbage to be sold. They don't want us to use the beef label. Is it just me, or is it a little creepy to have the world's wealthiest man casually talk about changing the behavior of people or using regulation to shift the demand? He seems to believe that these governments, which at the very least want these abominations properly labeled, are just kind of annoying. However, if you don't like his lab-grown synthetic beef, he's got another nifty plan with Jeff Bezos of Amazon and former Vice President Al Gore. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Al Gore are among the big names backing Nature's Find, a startup developing meatless burgers, dairy-free cheese, chickenless nuggets, and other products using a fermented volcanic microbe derived from Yellowstone National Park. Nature's Find was co-founded in 2012 by Thomas Jonas and Mark Kozubal, originally under the name Sustainable Bioproducts. Before co-founding the company, Kozubal had researched a microbe from volcanic hot springs in Yellowstone National Park called Fusarium strain Flavolapis. Kozubal and a team of scientists fermented the microbe into a protein-rich substance they call phi, which is now the foundation for their food products. Okay, the world is going to depend on a microbe from a volcanic hot spring for its protein needs. What could possibly go wrong with that? They are now even promoting that we should eat bugs. But don't take my word for it. According to a CNN health headline, the food that can feed and maybe save the planet. Bugs! From the article. On a morning in the not-too-distant future, you might toast bread made with cricket flour, drink a protein smoothie made from locust powder, and eat scrambled eggs made extra creamy with the fat from mopane caterpillars with a side of mealworm bacon. That meal would give you 4 times the iron, more than 3 times the protein, and more key vitamins and minerals than the bread, smoothie, eggs, and bacon you eat today, all while saving the planet. This control of food is a classic problem, reaction, and solution. The problem: we need to shift to a plant-based diet. The reaction: we must get rid of all the meat and give you substitutes. The solution: give you lab-grown meats. Lobby governments to enact laws to move people into fake and unhealthy meats. People get sicker. Big Pharma makes more money. Oh, and if you get really hungry, you can eat bugs. Chapter 9. The globalists try to find the narrative. Schwab and his Davos buddies keep trying to come up with a storyline that motivates people more than the classical idea that individuals struggle to lead a virtuous life, and in that effort, society is benefited. It seems as if they believe their failure to move people is because they haven't come up with that magical myth that the idiots will blindly follow. Schwab first tried the pitch, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but it didn't catch fire. Then he failed. He, when that failed, he released the book, Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Maybe because, like a tourist in a foreign country, he believes that if he just speaks slowly and loudly, he can get the locals to understand him. Next, he tried COVID-19, the Great Reset. But that was also a clunker. Maybe it struck people as a little maybe it struck people as a little insensitive for Schwab to say, in effect, hey, I know there was a global pandemic that killed millions of people, but let's look at this as an opportunity. Maybe, instead of being so provocative, he wanted to try for an exceptionally boring title. So his next effort, published in January 2021, was Stakeholder Capitalism. Stakeholder Capitalism, a global economy that works for progress, people, and the planet. Let's take a closer look at this effort, co-written with Peter Vanhem, who is head of Chairman's Klaus Schwab Communications at the World Economic Forum. In other words, he just happened to be in the office, so to speak. It must be so difficult for Klaus Schwab to have all these important people praising his book, only to have the regular people treat you like an embarrassing uncle. This is from Mark Benioff, Chairman and CEO of Salesforce. 50 years ago, Klaus Schwab first proposed his theory that businesses are not only responsible to their shareholders, but also to all of their stakeholders. With a global economic system generating deep divisions and inequalities, Klaus renews his call for a form of capitalism that works for everyone and where businesses don't just take from society, but truly give back and have a positive impact. Stakeholder capitalism is an urgent call to action. Mark Benioff would have you believe that before Klaus Schwab, nobody had ever raised the idea that businesses should be concerned with humanity. What kind of childhood did Benioff have? Did his parents never allow him to watch one of the many film adaptations of A Christmas Carol around the holidays? Has he never seen the ghost of Jacob Marley scream at Ebenezer Scrooge that instead of being a good man of business, mankind was my business? Has Mark Benioff never heard of charity? Schwab moves onto the praise from his next good friend, Alexander De Croo, the Prime Minister of Belgium, who wrote, "If you think this is just another pre-COVID, post-COVID book, think again. Klaus Schwab draws on his vast experience to take us on a roller coaster ride past the highs and lows of post-war capitalism. His knock for economic storytelling gives you a real and deep insight into where we are headed and what we should be aiming for." Yes, I'm sure the general public has been thinking to themselves, I've read so many pre- and post-COVID books and how the world is going to change by so many dictators who want to rule humanity. What is this one going to say that's new? Unfortunately, it seems that the politicians in every country have to start off by saying the stupidest possible thing. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, doesn't fare much better. This is his contribution. "In stakeholder capitalism, my good friend, Professor Schwab,
outlines an inspiring way forward in making the global economy more equitable, sustainable, and future proof. A vision that fits in perfectly with all his efforts over the years to build a better world. Once again, Professor Schwab gives us food for thought and reflection with this fascinating book. I find myself a little confused by the pronouncement of the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. How exactly is Schwab going to make the global economy future proof? Does that mean no dissent will be allowed? No disruptive technologies will be released to the public? Is it just me, or does it seem like the globalists don't like any future they don't control? In the preface, Schwab supports my premise that whether it was before COVID or after COVID, the Davos crowd has always been about globalism and tighter control over the world population. Schwab writes, "But now we have some distance from the essential crisis, from the initial crisis, and many of us, including myself, have come to realize the pandemic and its effects are deeply linked to problems we had already identified with the existing global economic system. This perspective brought me back to the discussion I've been having in February 2020 on the date of that fateful call from Beijing. Many of the analyses we had previously been working on were more true than ever. You will be able to read about them in this book. Don't you just love the intellectual openness of your typical globalist? He might as well have written, "I thought I was right before the pandemic, but now I know I'm even more right." No pause, no reflection, no criticism of anything that went on with any government anywhere in the world. Of course, those evil individual people will come in for strong criticism on account for not being collaborative and cooperative. But all those governments, they're just good and pure, like fresh rainwater from the sky. And it would be a Klaus Schwab. It wouldn't. And would it be a Klaus Schwab book without unfailing praise for the brutality of the Chinese Communist Party? Under the leadership of Chairman Mao from 1949 to 1975, the Communist Party of China became the lone governing party of the country, ending the political turmoil more decidedly. The CCP founded the People's Republic of China as a single party state, which brought stability to the regime for the price of democratic freedom. Democratic freedom. Is that just a quaint little concept, like chocolate bunnies for Easter? Or could it possibly be more important? An ideal for which people have fought and died over the centuries. Schwab spends no time on the concept, only noting how during the time of Chairman Mao, China did not experience much economic progress. Instead, it was Mao's successor, Deng Xiaoping, who pursued increased economic progress while the state maintained an iron grip on power. Schwab wrote, "Deng wanted to change that. In 1978, he visited Singapore. At the time, the island city-state was one of the four so-called Asian tigers: Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea. Economies based on foreign direct investments, the shielding of key industries from foreign competition, and export-led growth. Having been inspired by the city-state's example, he pursued a new economic development model for China as well. The reform and opening up starting in 1979.
Let's be honest about some of our terms. What's meant by the shielding of key industries from foreign competition? That's protectionism, plain and simple. When we talk about foreign direct investment, what we mean is international money men who are not interested in local conditions, just the amount of profit they can make. And how can a government promise these international financiers the maximum amount of profit? By having a one-party government, which is essentially what all of these so-called Asian tigers were, and remaining at this writing, this is what Schwab himself wrote of Singapore. In addition, Singapore's electoral model is very different from that of many other democracies. The ruling People's Action Party has led single party governments continuously since Singapore's independence in 1965. Other parties do participate in the country's general elections, organized every 5 years, and in 2020 even run close to 40% of the vote. But these opposition parties have failed so far to win a significant number of seats or lead major government ministries. As a result, Nikkei Asia Review reported Singapore ranked 75th in the Economist Intelligence Unit Global Democracy Index for 2019, behind regional peers Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. The city-state performed especially poorly in the category of electoral process and pluralism. Schwab does his usual analysis, mentioning a glaring flaw, such as the fact an opposition party has not won an election in 57 years in Singapore, then just moves on. The model Schwab loves is a simple one. The power of the state is combined with the power of big business, and the people are left without a voice. Tyrants always believe they're the smartest people in every room they occupy. For Schwab, elections just seem to be a formality. He'll work with those who got to their positions of power through the ballot or the bullet. The important thing is that leaders do his bidding, but in Schwab's formulation of the world, there's no doubt it's the corporations who should be in charge. To avoid the worst and achieve the best possible outcome, all stakeholders should remember the lessons from the past, and governments should shape inclusive policies and business practices. The challenge in regulating technological breakthrough is often the speed of innovation. As a frustrated chief executive once expressed to me, business moves in an elevator lifted by the force of creativity. Governments and regulatory agencies take the stairs of incremental learning. This situation poses a particular responsibility to companies in ensuring that all technological advances are well understood, not only in terms of their functionality for individual users, but also what they mean for society more broadly. Schwab seems to treat the government like some elderly parent who must occasionally be instructed what's proper to say these days and should not be said. In Schwab's view of the world, all honor and glory must go to the business person or entrepreneur, with little, if any, consideration of the value of oversight. And as for the public, well, the entrepreneur must make sure to talk to them like scared children who for some reason have an irrational fear of their latest offerings.
But sometimes the best spokesperson for the globalists might be an actual child, like Greta Thunberg. At the time she burst onto the world stage, and the stage at the World Economic Forum, she was only 16 years old. I wonder if she realizes the incongruity of her being allowed to lecture on such a stage to the wealthiest people in the world, that they have not done enough. Hopefully, at some point, as she gains a few more years and some more life experience, she will more deeply question the motives of those who promoted her on their various platforms. Schwab quotes the approval part. Schwab quotes with approval part of Thunberg's speech from the Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland in January 2019. At places like Davos, people like to tell success stories, but their financial success has come with an unthinkable price tag, and on climate change, we have to acknowledge that we have failed. All political movements in their present form have done so, and the media has failed to create broad public awareness. Schwab was quite clear in 2022 that he didn't want any dissent at his World Economic Forum. So how is it that he's promoting this young woman on his stage to criticize every member of the Davos gathering? My answer is because it serves the goals of Klaus Schwab. In order to take power, Schwab and his globalists need everything to be torn down. Thunberg wants to tear things down as well, so it serves his ends. Schwab continued, Thunberg had become known for her school strike for climate and a few months earlier, shaking up the debate about what has become known as the global climate crisis. In Davos, she used the platform to give the world a hard wake-up call on the actions needed to avert catastrophe. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, she said at a special press conference. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if your house is on fire, because it is. We all remember what it's like to be young and filled with moral righteousness. But as we matured, we started to have a greater understanding of the complexity of the world. We began to understand that the best decisions are not made from a place of panic, but from calm, rational consideration. If you were trapped in a burning house, would you want the firemen coming to rescue you to be filled with panic? Or would you want a fireman completely aware of the danger, methodically plotting out the best route to safety through the flames? Schwab then moves on from provoking you into a state of panic to hoping you follow his rash suggestions. In his next section on the key tasks of national governments, Schwab lays it out. At its simplest, the government's main role in the stakeholder model is to enable equitability, prosperity. That means a government should enable any individual actor to maximize his or her prosperity, but so in a way that is equitable for both people and the planet. It should do so in three primary ways. First, a government should value the contributions everybody makes to society, provide equal opportunities to all, and curb any excessive inequalities as they arise. Second, it should act as an
arbiter and regulator for companies operating in the free market, and third, as a guardian of future generations. It should put a stop to activities that degrade the environment. Let's consider all the various things wrong with Schwab's modest proposal. He seeks to change the fundamental role of government from that of protecting the rights of individuals to live as they see fit to this new goal of equitable prosperity. I'm absolutely terrified of vague expressions like equitable prosperity because they can so easily be used to justify acts of injustice. Let's say we've got two kids on a baseball team, but one of them can't hit a ball to save his life, while the other keeps hitting home runs. Is it equitable to let one of the kids have a career in professional baseball while the other needs to pursue a different career, like accounting? This is comforting pablum used to lull the public into not fully understanding the massive grab of power the globalists intend to pursue. Here's an example. The government should value the contributions everybody makes to society. Does that include drug dealers, murderers, war profiteers, and child molesters? In Schwab's formulation, the government at this point, no doubt stacked with globalists, will act as an arbiter and regulator for companies operating in the free market. Do you see how the government has just usurped the role of the justice system in Schwab's plan? And you can be certain that if the globalists are acting as regulators of the economy, there will be no free market, just crony capitalism and monopolies for their friends. Finally, Schwab claims the government role as a guardian of Schwab claims the government role as a guardian of future generations is order. Sorry, y'all. Finally, Schwab claims the government role as a guardian of future generations in order to protect the environment. Now, I consider myself an environmentalist, not wanting people to spray chemicals that cause the frogs to, behave in unusual ways, or have people eat genetically modified foods that I believe will negatively impact their health. But I'll detail for you exactly what I believe is wrong and what needs to be done to fix it. What I won't do is proclaim some universal right for the government to do anything it damn well pleases if it justifies it on the basis of environmentalism. This is the way tyrants take power. They don't tell you they want to steal your rights. They tell you that if you just give them the power, they will make it all better. But don't listen to them. Making the world a better place, whatever you believe that to be, is your job. Why is it that I remain so optimistic about our ability to defeat the globalists? It's because they can't tell a story to save their lives, and stories run the world. They fail to realize stories of freedom, of humanity's ability to triumph over great odds, are always more popular than stories of slavery or eternally young cyborgs, senseless and non-breeding. We are aware of what's wrong in the world. We want our stories to tell us how we, as individuals, can become heroes and make use of our limited time on this planet. Nothing proclaims the absolute failure of the globalists to say anything that the common people would support more than the publication on December 28th, 2021, of Schwab's latest book, co-written with Terry Mallard, The Great Narrative for a Better Future. As Schwab himself wrote in the introduction, as the most effective of conduits for ideas, narratives have the unique power to help us determine what's going on, what lies ahead, and what needs to be done. Hence the title of this book. Defined in the simplest possible terms, A narrative is a story about something. More aptly, for the purpose of the great narrative, it is also a way of presenting and understanding a situation or event that reflects and promotes a particular view of or sets of values. The problem that Schwab never seems to consider is whether the narrative is true. What follows is Schwab's choosing of experts who reflect his point of view that the increasing complexity of the world requires greater authoritarian power, whether it indirect government action or social shaming. But he never stops to consider the fundamental lie at the heart of his narrative. The lie is that the individual cannot be trusted to make their own decisions. It's a lie they'll never be able to sell, no matter how many experts they get to tell you that you can't be trusted with the choices of your life. Recently, Hollywood was rocked by the unexpected success of a movie that few expected to be so wildly popular. The star was recreating a role that he'd first played 35 years earlier. It dealt with genuine military heroism, and there was nothing remotely woke about it. I'm speaking, of course, of Tom Cruise's movie, Top Gun: Maverick, in which he portrays Pete Maverick Mitchell. What the globalists don't seem to understand is that a narrative can be fictional and yet reveal an underlying truth about humanity. We cheer not for the escape from almost certain death, but because it renews our belief in humanity's potential for greatness. The first scene sets the stage for the story that follows. Maverick is the test pilot for a futuristic jet called Dark Star, but the program is slated to be canceled in favor of unmanned drones. The essential conflict is set: man versus the machine. Dark Star is set for a test flight that day, at which point it's supposed to go to Mach 9, which would be a world record. Eventually, the plane is expected to reach Mach 10, but the flight has been canceled by the general, wonderfully played by Ed Harris. Maverick talks with the flight crew, who all know their jobs are about to be canceled along with the project. Maverick decides to take the jet up, because if he reaches Mach 9, the program must continue, as per the contract. At this point, Maverick is fighting for the jobs of his friends. Maverick takes off just as the general arrives and quickly climbs to the required altitude. All while the general is cursing out the flight crew, but the general can't do anything because Maverick is already airborne. Within a few minutes, Maverick has the jet up to Mach 9, and the ground crew tells him he can come back down. But Maverick has other plans. He takes the jet up to Mach 10. He has saved the jobs of the flight crew, but now he's seeing what is possible with the aircraft. The flight crew tells him to back it off, but Maverick keeps pushing. When he gets it up to Mach 10.3, the jet starts vibrating wildly, then disintegrates. The screen is silent, with us seeing a distant shot of the plane's debris falling to Earth. Has our hero died? The movie just started. We do not see Maverick falling to Earth, maybe struggling to open his parachute, filled with terror. Instead, we see the astonished flight crew, including the general, hanging their heads at what they believe to be the end of Pete Maverick Mitchell. The next scene is of some cowboy diner, maybe in the Rocky Mountains, and Maverick stumbles in, dazed, wearing his flight jacket suit. Soot on his face, his hair blown back like some fighter jock Einstein. And he asks, "Where am I?" The diners are startled by his appearance. None of them ask. The diners are startled by his appearance. None of them speak. Then one small boy pipes up, "Earth."
Incredibly cheesy, you might say, but there's brilliance in the story because it mirrors what we believe in the depths of our souls. Tom Cruise gives us a vision of how we want to one day present ourselves to God. I will fight to save those I love. I will fight next to realize great ambitions. And in the end, I will fight to be a completely unique individual. The globalists will never come up with such a compelling narrative because they don't believe in humanity. An inevitable consequence of the globalists believing they know how things should be done better than you. They know how things should be done better than you do comes across loud and clear when they try to establish cooperation, because they're not genuinely talking about cooperation. They're talking about submission to their will. Watch how Schwab tries first to push you into that panic stage before moving in for the kill.
Truly, shared values and well-established moral principles such as integrity, solidarity, and fairness are the glues that binds societies, enabling them to function and thrive in an atmosphere of trust. The magnitude of the issues we collectively face today, a deadly virus making us fear for our lives, the climate and environmental crisis, and the degradation of nature, generating existential fear about the future, the speed of technological change provoking anxiety for our livelihoods and our way of life, often shifts our attitudes from altruistic to self-centered. This is the persuasion play. Make an appeal to widely accepted values such as integrity, solidarity, and fairness. Then pivot to fear, COVID, climate change, environmental degradation, and the pace of technological change. The reader feels a little disoriented because they've moved so quickly from a place of pleasure, considering the values of integrity, solidarity, and fairness, to fears of the future. And then, when they're in a vulnerable state, tell them they've gone from being altruistic to self-centered. It really is domestic abuse of the reader, and you might want to seek out a shelter for reader abuse victims. Schwab then moves into the savior role. Isn't it strange that for 5 books, Schwab has revealed nothing about himself? When politicians are trying to win our vote, don't they usually tell us every nauseating detail about themselves? Like what their elementary school bus ride was like, or whether they may have bullied somebody in high school and live today in continual shame over the harm they may have inflicted decades ago? I believe it's a strategy. Schwab has made himself a blank slate, like movie stars used to do before they thought it was a good idea to share everything about themselves. That's because he knows that if he talks about the failures of others, the conclusion readers will draw is that Schwab and his Davos buddies have none of those flaws. They are consciously assuming the mantle of Übermenschen, the Superman, who never share the slightest detail about themselves, which would make us connect with them as human beings. Today, this polarization is cleaving our liberal societies and is a key threat to their very survival. An effective